The first thing Daniel noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind that follows a smooth landing. When passengers gather their bags and impatiently reach for their phones. This silence was wrong. It came a second after the violent shaking stopped. A second after the screaming. A second after the plane slammed into the frozen field with a force so brutal that Daniel Carter felt the air rip from his lungs. For a moment, he couldn't move. The dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting the cabin in a dull red glow. Luggage had burst from the overhead bins and scattered across the aisle. Somewhere nearby, a child was crying. Someone else was groaning in pain. The smell of smoke crept slowly through the air. Daniel blinked hard, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. He was alive. The thought came slowly, like his brain was still catching up with reality. Alive. A few minutes earlier, he had been staring out the airplane window thinking about grocery prices and whether his 8-year-old daughter Emma would be disappointed that he missed her. School play. Now he was sitting inside a broken airplane in the middle of nowhere. "Is everyone okay?" A shaky voice called from somewhere behind him. No one answered. Panic began spreading through the cabin like a ripple through water. Daniel forced himself to unbuckle his seatbelt. "Hey!" he said loudly, his voice rough but steady. "Listen to me. We need to move. There could be fire." His years as a construction worker had taught him one thing about disasters. Waiting usually made things worse. A man across the aisle struggled with a twisted seatbelt. Daniel leaned over and helped him free it. "Emergency exits," Daniel said. "Let's get them open." People began moving then, slowly, clumsily, but moving. Adrenaline pushed Daniel forward. He helped an elderly woman stand. He lifted a suitcase off a teenager's legs. He guided a frightened boy toward the aisle. And then he heard it. A faint voice. "Help, please!" It came from the back of the cabin. Daniel turned. Several seats had collapsed together where the fuselage had buckled. A woman was trapped there, pinned awkwardly beneath twisted metal and shattered plastic. Her dark hair was streaked with blood. Her breathing sounded shallow. Most people were already rushing toward the exits. Daniel hesitated for half a second. Then he ran toward her. "Hey," he said, kneeling beside the crushed row of seats. "I'm here." Her eyes fluttered open. They were sharp even through the pain. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "I won't." Daniel gripped the bent frame of the seat and pulled. It didn't move. The plane creaked ominously around them. Somewhere up front, someone shouted, "Fuel leak!" Daniel's heart pounded harder. He tried again, bracing his foot against the floor and yanking with everything he had. The metal groaned. "Still stuck," the woman gasped in pain. "I know," Daniel said softly. "I know, hang on." He scanned the wreckage quickly. A broken piece of luggage frame lay nearby. He grabbed it and wedged it under the twisted seat like a lever. Then he pushed. Hard. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly the metal shifted. Just enough. Daniel shoved the seat aside and reached for her. "Can you move your legs?" She tried and winced. "I think so." "Okay, we're getting out of here." He carefully lifted her arm over his shoulders. She was lighter than he expected, though her body trembled violently. Together they staggered down the aisle. Smoke thickened around them now. The cold night air burst into the cabin as someone opened the emergency exit. Passengers were sliding down the inflatable chute. Daniel helped the woman climb onto it. "You go first," he said. She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'm right behind you." She slid down. Daniel followed seconds later, landing hard in the snow. The freezing wind hit his face like a slap. Behind them, the damaged plane loomed dark against the empty field. Passengers gathered in small groups, some crying, some hugging strangers. Daniel helped the woman sit down. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "Because of you." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Rescue teams were coming. The woman studied his face carefully. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Daniel shrugged, suddenly awkward. "Just did what anyone would do." She gave a small, tired smile. "No," she said. "Most people ran." Before he could respond, paramedics rushed over and guided her onto a stretcher. As they lifted her away, she reached out and grabbed his hand. "What's your name?" "Daniel." "I'm Victoria." Then she disappeared into the flashing ambulance lights. Daniel stood alone in the snow for a long time. He assumed that was the end of it. But the next morning proved him wrong. Daniel woke up in a small hospital room with a dull headache and sore ribs. A nurse checked his vitals. "You're lucky," she said. "Minor injuries only." He smiled tiredly. Lucky seems like the right word. A few hours later, there was a knock on the door. Daniel expected a doctor. Instead, a tall man in an expensive suit stepped inside. "Mr. Carter?" "Yeah?" The man smiled politely. "Someone would like to see you." Daniel frowned. A moment later, the woman from the plane walked in. Victoria, but she looked very different now. Her hair was neatly brushed. Her arm was in a sling, and the way the suited man treated her with quiet respect made something click in Daniel's mind. "I didn't get to thank you properly," she said. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "You already did." Victoria pulled a chair beside his bed. "I should explain something," she said. Daniel waited. "I'm Victoria Hale." The name meant nothing to him. But the suited man behind her looked amused. "She owns Hale Technologies," he added. Daniel blinked. "That sounds expensive." Victoria laughed softly. "It is." The realization slowly sank in. The woman he had dragged from the wreckage wasn't just a passenger. She was a billionaire. Daniel suddenly felt very underdressed in his borrowed hospital clothes. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "I owe you my life," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," she said gently, "I do." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I helped because someone needed help." Victoria studied him carefully. "Most people help when it's easy," she said. "You helped when the plane might have exploded." Daniel shrugged again. "That's just how my dad raised me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria's expression changed. Something more serious. "I didn't come here just to thank you," she said quietly. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She took a slow breath. "Last night made me realize something." The room felt suddenly very still. "I've spent my entire life building companies," she continued. "Chasing success, expanding markets." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "But when that plane was falling," she said, "none of that mattered." Her voice softened. "What mattered was the stranger who refused to leave me behind." Daniel looked down at his hands. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "A start," she said. Inside was a check. Daniel stared at the number. It was more money than he had seen in his entire life. "I can't take this," he said immediately. Victoria smiled gently. "I knew you'd say that." She leaned back slightly. "So here's my confession." Daniel looked up. "I didn't sleep last night," she said, "because I kept thinking about how many people in the world are like you. Kind, hardworking, invisible." Her eyes shone with determination. "And how many people like me have the power to change things?" Daniel still didn't understand. Victoria continued. "I want to start something new," she said. "A foundation that helps single parents, families struggling to survive, people who just need one chance." Daniel's chest tightened slightly. "How does that involve me?" Victoria smiled. "I want you to help me run it." Daniel laughed in disbelief. "I pour concrete for a living." "And you risked your life for someone you didn't know," she replied. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Daniel stared at the check again, then back at her. "You're serious?" "Completely." He thought about Emma, about late bills, about working double shifts just to keep the lights on. Then he looked at Victoria. "You really think someone like me can do something like that?" Victoria's answer came without hesitation. "You already did," she said. Outside the hospital window, the morning sun was rising over the quiet city. For the first time since the crash, Daniel felt something unexpected. Hope. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage can change more than one life. Sometimes it can change the world.